This is Audiobook Caboodle YouTube channel. Place for finest collection of audiobooks and novels.
Don't Marry by James W. Donovan, Section 8. Romantic Marriages, Part 1. Caroline Crofton had completed her course at Vassar, one of its earliest graduates, and one of the most brilliant in her class of 30-odd young New England, graceful, gifted, and generous girls that have long been noted for their purity of principles and perfection of character. She was smaller than her classmates, an only daughter of Judge Crofton, whose manner and training marked him as a classical, refined, and upright gentleman, and a dignified and just judge. All that culture could impart, or character add to the graces of nature, was bestowed upon Caroline, who never assumed the fashion of shortening her name by fancy contractions. Carline was the shortest way of calling her, and this was not a favorite with her mother. From her father she inherited the qualities ascribed to her, while her mother, like a clinging vine wound around the oak, was of a trusting, lovable nature, of darker hair and eyes than the judge, and the two mingled in the daughter, and formed a slender figure in a graceful form. An ardent, lovable character, as one could easily discover. Diligent by nature and proud of her progress in early studies, Caroline had entered Vassar's advanced classes and employed all her energy to excel in each department. She literally lived in her books for 4 full years, to the exclusion of modes, society, or even the newspapers. Her one ambition seemed ever to be excellence, and when the graduating day arrived, and the long row in white were seated in breathless awe to read their papers and receive their reward, something more than a common interest was awakened. Such are the days when young men of wealth and ambition, and poorer men with an eye to the beautiful, come in and listen to the overdrawn pictures of school girls' first productions. The theme of Caroline Crofton was pioneers. How they had founded our government in the little log schoolhouses of New England in the 16th century. How they had established their town meetings and voting precincts. How they had gradually driven back the Indians, noble red men, from the rich, fertile valley of the Mohawk in New York, cleared away the underbrush from the fertile plains of northern Ohio and Pennsylvania, and boldly evaded the massive pineries of bleak, cold northern Michigan, dauntlessly, fearlessly, and bravely establishing schools and churches in the very midst of Indian huts and wigwams, taking their lives in their hands to improve and populate a great and growing nation, and how wonderfully they had all prospered. In her vivid and graphic picture of a fruitful theme, a theme learned from books and stories, she dwelt on the part that mothers had borne and brothers were bearing in this tide of prosperity and improvement, till teardrops came fast to the earnest eyes of the old gray-haired professors who were judges, and many a mother's heart leaped with joyous pride at the mention of brave sons battling with the western wilderness, for their sons were among them. Caroline Crofton could feel the hush of silence, always such applause as is irresistible. She could feel the emotion, and conveyed that emotion to her audience. She forgot herself, forgot her hearers, and read with a girlish animation born of deep-seated belief in the grandeur of the theme she advocated. Round after round of applause greeted her conclusion, and she staggered to her seat literally overcome by the brilliant effort which resulted in a handsomely inscribed medal as first of her class of Vassar. Whether the influence of that essay on the mind of Caroline, or its greater influence on Cyrus Arthur, a newly arrived resident of Vassar, was the most potent means of a quick acquaintance between them, is not well known to the writers. Certain it is that an early friendship soon refined into affection, and meagre inquiries into his character being satisfactory to Caroline, he was promptly admitted as a suitor at the dignified household of Judge Crofton on the banks of the beautiful St. Lawrence. The judge was led to believe that a long acquaintance had ripened between schoolmates, when in fact it was a love at first sight affair, and on very little consideration. That these young and ambitious lovers enjoyed all that is allotted to their class is forever a secret, for their after life reveals but little of its mystery. Their after life was a struggle for bread first and position soon after. They really put off living very foolishly. Cyrus Arthur was a large, strongly built, dark-haired, handsome fellow of considerable assurance in the social gatherings, and generally managed to lead off with the dances and parties from his size, and commanding way more than from any merit of talent or real goodness in himself. One of the village leaders who gained favor by fine looks and outward appearance, one of the petted class of forenoon brilliants, whose afternoons are often more shaded. There was a smile of serene contentment and half-satisfaction on the haughty face of young Arthur as he offered himself to the judge's daughter in that manner assumed by generals in battle. He obtained his prize, and she obtained her ambition. He married beauty, she married a leader. Her highly colored future was a life of intellectual greatness. His first pride was of conquest, then of distinction. A large man in a small place may be a little man in a large city. In good season they were married, of course, and of their courtship little need be said, for it was all unromantic. Arthur's father was a merchant of limited means, and the younger, having high notions of going west, to grow up with the country, early settled in a lumber-making city of North Michigan, where he took his fair young companion, who soon realized that her rose-colored romance of brave pioneers was not a living reality. Dreams are one thing, real life is another. Work was scarce in the big overgrown city, but plentiful in the pineries, and after the first day of married life wore into weeks, and living expense came around with painful regularity, the new couple were forced to economize, then look for employment, which they first found in tending store and camp. Cooking for a large lumber ranch, certainly far less refining than the vision of a Vassar schoolgirl's essay had pictured. But they prospered, and by dint of close saving, always coming from the wise counsel of the weaker one, they became managers, then owners, of a portable sawmill and a ranch, and gradually a store building partly paid for. From the letters home, showing their thrift and economy, gradually came small sums lent to the faraway idol of the staid old judge's household. Cyrus was surprised and delighted one day to find a large bill of goods sent on to fill up their store and give them a start in their hard beginning. It was the work and influence of that little brainy wife, whose tender hands had grown harder by cooking, mending, and working for 40 or more robust workmen, and the reward it brought, and the encouragement to both. With a well-stocked grocery and comfortable surroundings, Cyrus began to look the world in the face quite complacently, and take matters easier. Meanwhile, the silent ambition of Caroline determined, if growing up with the country meant anything, she would fathom its mystery, and she continued to delve and save, and plan and execute, and encourage her husband in his extensive contracts. Here was a profit on 40 laborers, a margin on their payment in goods, a rise in lumber, and a golden opportunity to buy vast contracts of pine timber at very low figures in cash payments. Drawing on her savings, the little wife advised wise investments. 57, 8, and 9 were the 3 trying years in northern Michigan. Many a man would cheerfully trade a load of shingles for a bag of corn, and 1,000 feet of timber for a single ham. New England thrift was in the market, and the little daughter of a discreet judge balanced the chances and made hay and sunshine most effectually. 4 years passed by, and a rapid rise in prices gradually increased the value of timber, then lumber, then shingles, then lands, and long before the war ended, Arthur and his once timid wife were among the wealthy citizens of the Rapids. A large, strong frame, and but little anxiety, a dark, swarthy complexion, with a heavy black beard. The face of such a man at 38 showed less signs of wear than his little fair-faced companion at 6 years younger. Age, climate, work, and care were telling on the slender build of Caroline. The rapid birth of 3 children in 10 years told also their story of a mother's anxiety, written in shading lines on her once delicate features. Absorbed in her duties as a wife, She had little room for society, while he, a man relieved by riches from hard labor, was approaching that prime of maturity when the world looks complacently upward to one who has prospered, not even asking how or why or any reason. Long trips to large cities, absence from home, mingling often with wealthy lumbermen, and assuming that position that wealth ever commands in society, were doing for Cyrus Arthur what they will do for many in like situations. He craved a larger field for usefulness. He moved and settled in a large city. He craved society. He was a favorite with women. He developed a fondness for the more forward class. He fell often. If he had ever loved his devoted wife, the author of all his success and prosperity, he now grew unloving, haunted by the caresses of more passionate women, driven by appetite to seek the companionship of the brazen and deceitful. He lost his self-respect, his love of home, and grew madly in love with the most bewitching character, lately divorced from her husband. A spell came over him. The trail of the serpent is over them all, the 12th temptation, as shown in the powerful drama of its name, that takes a farmer boy in innocence, carries him safely through the perils of a great city, saves him from saloons and wine, and larceny and dishonesty, and at last, when weakened by tampering with sin, brings him face to face with such dazzling beauty that his fall before it seems as natural as his ruin later is effectual. The trail of the serpent had crossed by the path of Arthur. The coil wound around him, for he loved the bold siren who enchanted him, and yielded to the 12th temptation. End of section 8.
This was Audiobook Caboodle YouTube channel presentation. We hope you enjoyed listening. For full audiobook, check out our playlist section. Links in description below.